Maris Daven slammed the schoolhouse ledger shut and stood her ground. "I paid for my room through Friday," she said, fingers still pressed to the worn cover. "You can't just decide I'm someone else's problem," because the wind changed. Mrs. Cutter's hand stayed tight on the doorknob, shoulders squared like a barricade. "I can when my roof's about to give," she snapped. "Boys are bunking in the front parlor. My sister's sleeping on the kitchen table, and the stove's eating coal faster than the mind can hold it. There ain't space for an extra schoolmarm." Behind them, the last of the children's footsteps faded off the boardwalk, their laughter swallowed by the closing door. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you." Maris heard the latch click and felt the word extra scrape down her spine like a nail. Not teacher. Not the woman who'd ridden 3 days by coach and another 8 miles by wagon to reach Alder Creek with a trunk. A contract and a spine she prayed was tougher than it felt. Just extra. "If I go back out there," she said, keeping her tone steady, "where exactly am I supposed to sleep, Mrs. Cutter?" The boarding house keeper's gaze flicked past Maris's shoulder, toward the high windows where white pressed thick against the glass. She didn't say storm, didn't have to. The strain in her jaw said enough. "You're the new one," Mrs. Cutter muttered. "The school board said you're practical." Maris heard the word plain underneath it, the way she'd heard it all her life. "You'll think of something. There is no stagecoach until the pass clears," Maris said. "No rail line closer than Fort Hawthorne. I can't sleep in the schoolroom. The stove leaks smoke. The board promised lodging with my wage. And I kept that promise until today," Mrs. Cutter said, color rising. "You think I enjoy tossing paying folk onto the street? You want to stand under my ceiling while the rafters groan and pray they don't come down on you?" Maris swallowed. The memory of the last roof she stood under when timbers cracked lived in her bones like old bruises. She still woke in the night sometimes with the smell of dust in her throat and her brother's fingers slipping out of her hand. "I think," Maris said quietly, "you're making a choice about whose safety matters most." Something in Mrs. Cutter's eyes softened for a breath, then steeled again. "The boys sleep here," she said. "They got fathers in the mine, mothers who scrubbed floors in that saloon, and nowhere else to lay their heads but my walls. You got a wage and 2 good boots. It ain't fair, but it's the truth. Truth didn't keep you warm. Truth didn't settle in your lungs as anything but cold air." Maris straightened, holding Mrs. Cutter's gaze until the boarding house keeper's hand loosened on the knob. "If you put me out," Maris said, "I still have to teach those boys algebra in the morning. Do you want your schoolmarm coughing herself to death in the street before winter's through?" "Don't you dare put that on me," Mrs. Cutter snapped. "I'll send word to the council. They'll sort you out. But tonight she's coming with me." The new voice slid into the room like a door blown open. Maris turned. He filled the hallway. Not in the way of heavy men who'd spent too many evenings leaning on bar counters, bellies pushing against suspenders. This man was tall the way cottonwoods were rooted, solid, built from something that didn't know how to bend. Broad shoulders, sun-browned skin that even winter couldn't pale, dark hair falling over his brow in a way that looked accidental but somehow deliberate. A battered hat dangled from one hand, dripping melted snow onto the floorboards. His coat hung open, revealing a shirt stretched across a chest that had done honest work and a gun belt that looked like it had lived on his hips since he could walk. She didn't know why her first clear thought was. The doorframe looked small around him. The second thought came sharper, stranger. She had not seen him in her classroom, not on the boardwalk as she walked to and from the schoolhouse, not in the back pew of the church where she sat each Sunday, unnoticed. Mrs. Cutter shifted, some of the sharpness draining from her posture. "Jonah Kade," she said, like his name explained things. It didn't explain anything for Maris. I'm in the middle of a private conversation, Maris said, squaring her shoulders. Good thing I'm not private, Jonah answered. His voice had a gravel edge, deep and quiet, the sort of sound that made you lean in, even when you didn't intend to. Half the town knows about it already. You hear anything in Alder Creek, you hear it twice by sundown. He stepped farther into the room, bringing the cold with him in the way his coat steamed and his boots left damp prints. Up close, Maris saw details. A scar running from his left eyebrow into his hairline, white against tan skin. Hands broad and knuckled, marked by rope burns and old cuts. A faint line along his jaw that looked like someone had once tried to introduce him to a bottle the wrong way. He didn't apologize for interrupting. He just looked at her, steady and assessing, like a man judging the soundness of a horse before he put his weight in the saddle. It made her want to straighten more and, annoyingly, check if there was chalk on her cheek. There's nowhere for her to go, Mrs. Cutter muttered. I told you that already. That's not quite true, Jonah said. Maris folded her arms. Do you make a habit of inserting yourself into other people's disasters, Mr. Kade? Sometimes, he said. When the disaster's marching straight toward my land. Her jaw tightened. I beg your pardon? He hooked a thumb toward the back of the boarding house, where the hills rose. My ranch sits closer than anything between here and the pass, he said. Storm's already swallowing the low road. She steps out of this house without a plan. She ends up drifting against my fence line like a scarecrow. I got enough ghosts on my land. Don't need another. Maris bristled at the image of herself as wind-blown detritus. I am not your responsibility, she said. Good, Jonah said. Because I'm not offering responsibility, Miss Daven. I'm offering a trade. The word trade snagged her attention the way the word free never had. What kind of trade? She asked. He glanced at her satchel and the chalk dust smudged on her cuffs, then at the slate propped near the stove with neat sums still written on it. I've got a boy out at my place, Jonah said. Sharp eye. Wilder than a range colt. Won't come near town school. Says the walls make his lungs fold up. His ma died 3 winters back, and his pa. He trailed off, jaw flexing. His pa ain't around to argue about it, Jonah finished. I've been trying to teach him what I can, between calving and fence mending. It ain't enough. Maris's heart gave a small, treacherous tug. A boy, somewhere past those hills, refusing letters and sums and book learning, because grief had taught him the world could collapse without warning. She knew that lesson too well. And what do you propose? She asked, trying to keep her voice cool. You come out to Kade Ranch, Jonah said. You take the spare room. You teach Cal, mornings and evenings, until road's clear, and the board finds you a proper room in town, or until my boy decides. He wants to sit on one of those benches of yours with the other colts. In return, you don't freeze to death on Mrs. Cutter's front step tonight. Mrs. Cutter looked like someone had handed her a miracle and a scandal in the same breath. Now, Jonah, she started. You said you're full. Jonah cut in gently. I'm not. Maris's cheeks burned. Live in his house. In a ranch out past the edge of town. Just her, a boy, and a man whose shoulders looked built to carry trouble. She imagined the council's faces. The murmurs at church. The way the saloon's piano would pause as the story spread. She imagined more urgently the boards of the schoolhouse floor under her thin mattress. The way the night wind had already snuck through the gap in the wall and curled its fingers around her throat. You assume a great deal, Mr. Kade, she said. That I'd be willing to accept such an arrangement. You assume a great deal. Miss Daven, he replied, that I like inviting strangers to share my roof. Their gazes locked. He didn't look away first. Neither did she. Silence stretched, taut as a lariat. You'd have your own room, Jonah said finally. Door with a lock on it. My foreman, Pike, sleeps in the bunkhouse with the hands. It's just me and Cal in the house. Her mind supplied questions she didn't want to ask in front of Mrs. Cutter. Why just him and a boy? Where was his wife? Had there been one? The scar over his brow suggested fights, Maris said. Not wedding bands. I don't accept charity. Good, he answered. I don't offer it. Heat flared in her cheeks again, this time something sharper than embarrassment. You're suggesting I come to your ranch, she said, enunciating each word, sleep under your roof, and teach your boy in exchange for a bed and meals. Yes, and what would the town say? They'll say more if you end up dead in a snowbank. Mrs. Cutter made a strangled sound. For heaven's sake, Jonah, she's not dying on my stoop. Then help her choose, he said, still looking at Maris. You want her walking from house to house asking for a spare cot? There's not a mattress in Alder Creek that isn't already holding someone. I know. I asked before I came here. He'd asked. The thought knocked her off balance more than the offer itself. You knew I'd be turned out, she said slowly. I knew Mrs. Cutter was short on beds and long on nerves, Jonah said. Word of the storm hit the mine early. Men are sending their boys into town. The boarding house always bursts at the seams when the weather turns ugly. He still didn't say blizzard, but the way he glanced at the window, at the white pressed thick against the panes, told her he'd been measuring its teeth since dawn. I can manage, Maris said, though her voice lacked conviction. Can you? Jonah asked softly. Against her will, her mind conjured the image he'd thrown at her. Her body slumped against some half-buried fence, skirts stiff with ice, fingers curled around an empty satchel. No, she refused to let that be the way her story ended. Not this soon, not in a town where her name had barely stuck in anyone's memory. What's wrong with your own walls? She asked, buying time. Why aren't you hunkered down by your own stove instead of meddling in boarding house affairs? My stock's stabled, my hands are fed, and the chores are as done as they'll ever be before the sky decides what it wants to do, Jonah said. Cal's at home with Pike. I rode in for salt and lamp oil and to tell the council I'm not sending the boy in for lessons until they fix that north wall. Then Mrs. Cutter mentioned she had a problem she was about to shove into the street. His mouth curved. Not quite a smile, more a grim twist. I don't to walk past problems when they've got two eyes and a stubborn chin, he said. I bring them home and see if they can learn to ride fence. You're calling me a problem, Maris said, incredulous. Right now? Jonah said. Yes. Mrs. Cutter let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh, then covered it with a cough. Maris wanted to be offended. Instead, she felt a ridiculous urge to laugh too. This is absurd, she said, more to herself than them. I came here to teach, to have a respectable post, to build something. What, exactly? A life that wasn't built around someone else's timber. A roof she could trust. A town where she was known first as Miss Daven, schoolteacher, not as that girl from the mill with the brother who died when the roof fell. You can still do that, Jonah said. This is just a detour. The pass will clear. The council will fix that wall or find you another roof. You'll stand in front of those benches and teach those boys to add and subtract. You'll still be respectable, Miss Daven, but only if you live through tonight. His bluntness scraped her defenses raw. She looked at Mrs. Cutter. The woman's expression had shifted. Less defensive now, more pleading. I don't want to put you out, Mrs. Cutter said, but my house is full. My boys are scared as it is. The way the wind's been howling, they jump at every creak. If the ceiling so much as moans, they'll be halfway under the bed. I can't take on one more soul and sleep at night. Maris's throat tightened. She thought of those boys' wide eyes, calloused hands, trying to remember multiplication tables while their fathers swung pickaxes in dark tunnels. She pictured herself walking away from them, shoulders squared, saying she'd chosen her own comfort over their mother's peace of mind. She had told herself, boarding the coach, that this time she would not run at the first sign of hardship. But she'd never promised not to bend. Slowly, Maris unclenched her hands from the ledger. "What assurances do I have," she asked Jonah, "that your offer is what you say it is? That I want to arrive at your ranch only to find a bunk in the barn between 2 pigs and a wagon wheel?" "I don't keep pigs," Jonah said. "They argue too much. As for assurances—" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased and softened by handling. He held it out. Maris hesitated, then took it. The letter bore the heavy, looping script of Councilman Everett, the same hand that had signed her appointment. "Miss Daven, until such time as we can secure you permanent lodging in town, Mr. Jonah Kade has agreed to provide room and board at his ranch in exchange for private instruction for his ward. This arrangement has been approved by the Alder Creek School Board and will be reviewed at the end of the season. Please accept our apologies for any inconvenience. Elias Everett, Council Chair." She read it twice. Her cheeks burned. "You all decided this without asking me," she said. Jonah's mouth ticked. "I decided it was an option. You get to decide whether to take it. That letter makes it sound like I already have." "That letter makes it sound like the council wants you alive," Jonah said. "Alive teachers can argue about wording later." The urge to tear the paper in half wrestled with the urge to clutch it against her chest. She settled for folding it carefully and sliding it into her satchel. "I don't like being cornered," she said. "Then don't stand in corners," Jonah replied. "You coming?" The question hung between them, simple and terrible. Stay and risk freezing, or worse, risk being the piece that toppled Mrs. Cutter's house of cards. Go and step into a story she hadn't planned on. She thought of her brother's face the last time she saw him, eyes wide, as dust poured through the ceiling. His hand clamped around hers until it didn't, his mouth forming her name. She'd promised him she'd get out of that town. She hadn't promised the path would be neat. Maris squared her shoulders. "I'll come," she said. "On conditions." Jonah's brows rose. "Name them." "I have my own rules," she said. "My door stays locked at night. I keep my own pay from the council, separate from whatever trade we agree on. I am not hired help for your ranch. I am a teacher who happens to be under your roof." "Fine," he said. "I rise early," she continued. "I will set lessons for your boy at dawn and after supper. If you expect me to help with chores, it will be within reason. I did not come west to be a cook or laundress." "Pike cooks," Jonah said. "Badly, but he tries." "You're not touching the wash unless you want to." "I keep my own counsel," Maris said. "If I hear something in your house that concerns me, a fight, raised voices, anything that might harm your ward, I will speak. And I will leave if I must." Jonah's jaw worked. "Agreed," he said after a moment. "You agree too easily," she said, suspicion prickling. "Lady, I'm standing here asking you not to die on my fence line," Jonah said, exasperation creeping into his voice. "You think I'm going to argue about you locking your door?" Mrs. Cutter let out a breath that trembled. "Thank the Lord," she said. "I'll fetch your trunk." "You'll do no such thing," Jonah said gently. "You've got half a house to mind." "I'll carry it." He moved past Maris then, close enough that she caught the scent of him beneath the cold horse. Leather, a hint of tobacco that clung to him like a memory, not a habit. He ducked into the small room where she'd been staying, grabbed her battered trunk as if it weighed nothing, and hoisted it to his shoulder. Maris's pride bristled. "I can carry that," she said. "I know," he said. "But if you're coming with me, you'll be doing enough heavy lifting." The words were casual. They landed heavy. She grabbed her satchel and the small stack of books she refused to part with, then followed him to the door. Mrs. Cutter caught her hand. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered, "for the way this came on you." Maris looked at her tired eyes, the strain carved into the lines around her mouth. "I'm not angry," Maris said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I'm adjusting." "Well," Mrs. Cutter squeezed her fingers. Adjust somewhere warm. Maris stepped out onto the boardwalk. The cold hit her like an open palm. Snow had packed itself against the side of the building in dense drifts, rising almost to the lower window panes. The wind flung fine ice crystals through the air, stinging her cheeks like thrown grit. The world beyond the main street was a blur of white and shadowed shapes, buildings, fencing, a wagon half buried. Jonah stood beside a big bay gelding hitched to a sled-style wagon, the kind used to haul hay bales in winter. Another horse coal-black, with a white blaze down its face, tossed its head, snorting plumes of breath into the frigid air. "Ever ridden in deep snow?" Jonah asked. "Not like this," Maris admitted. He studied her boots. "Those will do for town," he said. "They won't do for my hills." "I beg your pardon. My boots are perfectly serviceable," she said, stung. "They're town shoes with ideas above their station," he said. "You'll be soaked to the knees before we reach the ridge." He turned and called over his shoulder. "Pike!" For a moment, the only answer was the wind. Then a man emerged from the livery stable across the street, shrugging on a coat as he ran. He was shorter than Jonah, wiry, with a beard that tried to look fierce and mostly succeeded in looking stubborn. "You bellowed?" Pike asked. "Trade Miss Daven your boots for the spare pair in the wagon," Jonah said. "Wrap her skirts in canvas. I don't you want to be digging ice out of her, when we hit the rise." "I am present," Maris said sharply. "You can speak to me, not over me." Jonah turned back, meeting her eyes. "You about to ride 10 miles in a storm that doesn't to care whether you respectable," he said. "I am telling my man how we going to keep you from losing your toes. If you got a better plan, say so." She bit back the first response that leapt to her tongue. Her pride wanted to go toe-to-toe with his pragmatism. Her sense wanted warmth. "Fine," she said tightly. "But I keep my own stockings." Pike smiled, eyes crinkling. "Ma'am, nobody wants your stockings but you." He dug in the back of the wagon, producing a pair of heavy, fur-lined boots and a roll of oiled canvas. Maris let herself be shepherded behind the wagon for a semblance of privacy. Her fingers shook as she unbuttoned her boots, more from cold than nerves. She swapped them for the heavier pair, which were too big but blessedly warm, then let Pike wrap her skirts snugly in the canvas, tying it off just below her knees. She felt ridiculous. She also felt less like brittle glass. When she stepped back into the street, Jonah gave her a short nod of approval. "Better," he said. "Do I pass your inspection, Mr. Kade?" she asked dryly. "For now." He mounted the bay gelding in a single smooth motion, then reached down a hand to her. Maris stared at it. "I am not riding in front of you," she said. "You want to walk?" He asked. "It's only 10 miles. Might freeze the hesitation right off you." Pike coughed into his hand. Jonah's eyes softened a fraction. "You'll ride behind me," he said. "My legs keep the wind off. You keep your satchel in front, against your chest. Hold on to me or fall off. Your choice. No good options. Only necessary ones." She looped her satchel strap crosswise, tightened it, and reached for his hand. He hauled her up like she weighed nothing, settling her on the saddle behind him. Her knees bracketed his hips. The solidity of him under her, the heat radiating through his coat, made her suddenly aware of every inch of her own body. She wrapped her arms around his middle, fingers catching on the rough weave of his shirt. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Not in the slightest." "Good. Means you're paying attention." He clicked his tongue, and the gelding lurched forward, hooves crunching through the packed snow. The town slid past them, lamplight behind fogged windows, silhouettes of people moving inside, a dog barking once before vanishing into a doorway. No one stepped out to watch them go. People rarely did when a woman left under strange circumstances. The last glimpse Maris had of Alder Creek was the dim outline of the schoolhouse, its crooked chimney leaning like a tired man. She tightened her hold on Jonah without meaning to. "You can still change your mind," he said over his shoulder. "No," she answered. "I already did. That's why I'm here." He seemed to consider that, then gave a small nod she felt rather than saw. The road out of town narrowed quickly, flanked by scrub and low pines. Snow drifts rose like frozen waves, the wind carving ridges and hollows. The sky had gone the flat, unforgiving white of a world without edges. "Is your boy expecting me?" she asked after a while, voice muffled by the scarf she'd wrapped around her mouth. "Cal knows I went to town," Jonah said. "He doesn't know I'm bringing trouble." She bristled again. "If you call me trouble one more time, I'll turn around and walk back." "Can't," he said. "Wind's at our back. You'd never make it to the first fence post. Then I will throw you off your own horse and ride him the rest of the way." He chuckled, the sound low and surprising. "I'd pay to see you try," he said. Her cheeks warmed, though the air biting at them was cruel. They rode in silence for a stretch, the rhythm of the horse's movement and the swish of snow under hooves the only sounds. Maris's thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the life she'd left behind. The narrow streets of Milford, the constant grit in the air from the factory, the foreman's shouting, the way her mother's hands had cracked and bled from scrubbing linens that weren't theirs. Her brother's cough, the day the roof gave. Stop, she told herself, not now. Not with a stranger's heartbeat under her cheek and a future she hadn't planned galloping toward her. "Why did you really come west?" Jonah asked suddenly. She stiffened. "Do you ask all your house guests questions this intrusive?" "Don't have many house guests," he said. "The last one was a preacher who tried to tell my cattle about damnation. How did that go?" They chewed his hat. Despite herself, she huffed a laugh. "I came because there was a post," she said. "A letter on the church notice board. Teacher needed in Alder Creek. Room, board, and monthly wage. Preference given to applicants with fortitude and patience." "Fortitude," he repeated. "Big word for a small town." "I liked the honesty," she said softly. "Most places just say good character and mean willing to tolerate any indignity. Fortitude sounded like they knew what they were asking." "And did they?" She thought of the draft creeping through the schoolhouse wall, the way the boys watched her like they were waiting to see if she'd run, the letter in her satchel that treated her life like a piece in a puzzle that could slide across a board. "Yes," she said. "I think they did." The wind rose, flinging stinging crystals against their faces. Jonah leaned forward, urging the gelding into a steadier pace. "Storm's closing her fist," he muttered. He flicked the reins, guiding the horse off the main track onto a narrower, less trodden path that wound between low hills. The snow was deeper here, the drifts piled high enough that Maris sometimes lost sight of the ground altogether. "How often do you make this ride?" she asked, fighting the urge to clamp her eyes shut. "Every few days," he said. "Town and back, weather permitting. Feed, mail, trouble. You fetch trouble on purpose?" "It finds me either way." The path dipped into a shallow ravine, flanked by rock outcroppings that broke the wind. For a brief, blessed stretch, the world grew quieter. Then the horse stumbled. Jonah cursed softly, pulling back on the reins. The gelding floundered for a moment, snow up to its chest, then found footing again. "What happened?" Maris asked, heart leaping. "Snow covered the old creek bed," he said. "Didn't see the drop." He swung his leg over and slid off the saddle, landing with a grunt as snow swallowed him to mid-thigh. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Lightening the load," he said. "Stay on. If the horse goes down, kick free and roll away from him so you don't get crushed." He began trudging ahead, leading the gelding by the bridle, breaking a path through the drift with his own body. Maris watched the way the snow clung to his coat, the way each step took effort and stubbornness. "You'll exhaust yourself," she said. "Better me than the horse," he grunted. "Or you." The words came out so matter-of-fact, They startled her more than any gallantry would have. "Do you always assume you have to carry everything?" she asked quietly. "Only the things that'll fall apart if I don't," he said. Her throat tightened again for reasons that had nothing to do with cold. They inched forward, the wind shrieking over the rim of the ravine. Maris clung to the saddle horn, fingers numb despite her gloves. A sudden crack echoed. The horse lurched sideways, a leg plunging into emptiness. Maris pitched. The world tilted, sky and snow swapping places. Her grip slipped. For a heartbeat, she was back in the mill, boards shuddering under her feet, her brother's hand sliding out of hers. No, something slammed into her waist. Jonah's arm. He yanked her off the saddle and into him as the horse scrambled, eyes rolling white, nostrils flaring. They tumbled together into the snow. Cold exploded around her, up her sleeves, under her collar. She ended up half sprawled across his chest, his arm locked around her like an iron band, his other hand still clamped on the reins. The gelding snorted, sides heaving, but found its footing again, hooves striking solid ground. Maris's heart hammered so hard it hurt. "You all right?" Jonah asked, breath harsh against her ear. She could taste fear on her tongue. Memories and present tangled. She forced air into her lungs. "Yes," she said, though her voice shook. "You?" "Been thrown by worse," he said. He shifted, pushing himself upright with a wince, bringing her with him. Snow clung to his lashes, melting into drops that traced down his cheek like something softer than he'd ever admit. "You let go too soon," he said. "I thought the ground was going to disappear," she said, angry at the quiver in her tone. "It did," he said. "That's when you hold tighter." She wanted to snap back that holding tighter hadn't saved her before. He helped her to her feet, hands firm around her elbows, then rushed snow from her shoulders with quick, efficient motions. "Next time I say kick free and roll, do it," he said. "Don't freeze." "I didn't freeze." "You did," he said, not unkindly. "Just for a second." "That's all it takes." She clenched her jaw. "I'm still here," she said. Something flickered in his eyes. "Yeah," he said. "You are." They pressed on. The ravine shallowed, the snow thinning enough that Jonah could mount again. This time, when he reached down, Maris took his hand without argument. They rode closer. She didn't pretend she was doing it for balance alone. After what felt like hours measured in heartbeats and hoof falls, a darker line appeared on the horizon fencing, low and half buried, stretching across the whiteness. "Kade Land," Jonah said. The gate loomed up, half open, snow drifted against its lower slats. Beyond it, shapes emerged outbuildings, a long, low barn, a house set back against the rise of a hill, its roofline stark against the sky. Smoke rose from the chimney in a steady plume. Warmth. The sight hit Maris so hard she almost cried. As they rode through the gate, a figure burst out of the barn, hat askew, coat flapping. He was small, maybe 10 or 11, all elbows and knees, with straw-colored hair sticking up like he'd been racing the wind. "Pa!" he yelled, voice cracking. "You're late." He skidded to a stop when he saw Maris on the horse, behind Jonah. His eyes startlingly blue, sharp as flint narrowed. "What's that?" he demanded. Jonah snorted. "That is Miss Daven," he said. "Your new teacher." The boy's mouth dropped open. "You said the storm would keep everybody in town," he accused. "You said we wouldn't have to deal with nobody new till spring." "I lied," Jonah said mildly. The boy scowled. "I don't want a teacher," he announced. "School smells like hats and fear." Maris slid off the horse, landing in snow that reached the tops of her borrowed boots. "Luckily for you," she said, tugging her scarf down, "I don't smell like hats." The boy's gaze flicked over her, taking in the canvas-wrapped skirts, the stray curls escaping her pinned hair, the satchel strap digging into her shoulder. "You smell like town," he said. Cal, Jonah warned. Cal crossed his arms. We don't need no schoolmarm out here. We got cattle and fences and coyotes. Pa teaches me what I need. And does your father teach you to read maps? Maris asked. So you can find your way home if you're ever lost? Cal opened his mouth and closed it. And figures? She continued. So you know how many bales of hay will last through a winter without your stock starving. Or letters, so you can write to the council someday and tell them exactly what you think of their decisions. One corner of Cal's mouth twitched. I already know how to cuss at them without writing, he muttered. I assumed as much, she said. I'm offering. Options. He looked at Jonah. Do I have to? He asked. No, Jonah said. Maris's head snapped toward him. No? She repeated. He doesn't have to like you, Jonah said. He doesn't have to sit docile at a desk and recite his letters like a parrot. But he will learn from you. Cal's scowl deepened. That sounds like have to me. I prefer to avoid lying twice in one day, Jonah said. You'll work it out between you, or you'll both make each other miserable. Either way, you'll be smarter at the end of it. Maris eyed them both. She saw the distance between father and son, the way Cal stood slightly angled, ready to bolt, the way Jonah's shoulders held a tension that had nothing to do with cold. This house held more than warmth. It held fractures. She wondered, not for the first time that day, what exactly she'd agreed to. Pike appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. Got the front room warmed, he called. Sheets on the bed, basin filled. I even found a curtain that ain't been chewed by moths. Miss Daven will take it, Jonah said. Cal's eyes widened. She's staying here? Temporarily, Maris said firmly. Cal looked between her and Jonah, suspicion thick in his gaze. You bringing strange women home now? He demanded of his father. Thought you said that led to nothing but trouble. Maris's cheeks burned. Jonah's face shuddered. Inside, he said, voice flat. Cal opened his mouth, caught the tone, and shut it again. He stomped up the steps, boots thudding, and slammed the door behind him hard enough to rattle the window panes. Pike winced. Got to teach that boy some respect, he muttered. Got to teach him not to repeat everything he hears, Jonah said under his breath. The words pricked Maris's curiosity like a needle. She pretended not to have heard. Jonah turned to her. You'll want to get out of those wet things, he said. Pike will show you your room. Supper in an hour. His tone had shifted, less conversational, more commanding. It made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. I appreciate your hospitality, she said carefully. But we should establish something now, Mr. Kade. He waited. I'm not part of your household the way your hands are, she said. I am not an extra set of arms you can point at whatever needs doing and expect obedience. I'm here under a professional agreement. His gaze darkened. You re-under my roof in the middle of one of the worst storms this valley has seen in a decade, he said quietly. That means I'm responsible for keeping you alive. You don't owe me obedience. You owe me the sense not to wander outside after dark or light yourself on fire trying to stoke the stove. I know how to manage a stove, she snapped. He stepped closer, just enough that she had to tilt her head to meet his eyes. I don't doubt what you know, he said. I doubt how much the council told you about this place before they sent you out here. The wind gusted, slamming against her back. There was something in his expression, an old caution, maybe even fear, that unsettled her more than the storm. What exactly should they have told me? She asked. His jaw tightened. That some storms don't come from the sky, he said. They come from men. From things that happened on this land long before you set foot on it. A chill slid down her spine that had nothing to do with snow. Before she could ask what he meant, the house door flew open again. Cal stood framed in the doorway, eyes wide. Pa, he gasped. It's back. Jonah's entire body went still. What's back? He asked. Cal's gaze flicked to Maris, then to the hill beyond the house. The light, he whispered. By the north fence. The one Pike says ain't real. The wind rose, wailing around the eaves. Jonah swore under his breath. He looked at Maris, something hard and resigned settling over his features. "Welcome to Kade Ranch, Miss Daven," he said. "Looks like your first lesson out here's not going to be arithmetic. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story." Maris tightened her grip on the fence rail as Jonah moved toward the barn. He didn't run. He walked the way men do when they know running wastes breath and fear. "Inside," he told Cal again. The boy hovered in the doorway, snow crusting his lashes, eyes fixed on the dark rise beyond the pasture. "I saw it clear," Cal insisted. "Up by the north fence, same place as before." It blinked. Like someone couldn't keep the flame alive, Pike shifted his weight near the porch, rifle loose but ready. "Snow glare," he muttered, not convincing even himself. "Cold plays tricks." Maris watched Jonah's shoulders tighten. "Cold doesn't cut wire," she said. Jonah glanced back at her once, sharp and assessing, then reached inside the barn and lifted a rifle from its pegs. "What happens when the light shows?" she asked. "Nothing," Jonah said. "That's why it matters." Cal swallowed. "Sometimes you hear things, hooves or singing." Jonah's jaw flexed. "Enough," he said. "Inside. Both of you." Maris stepped forward. "No." 3 heads turned. "You go alone," she continued, voice steady, "and whoever's using that light gets exactly what they want. Your attention, your distance from this house." Pike frowned. "Miss, I'll stay lower," she said quickly. "By the pasture fence. Solid ground. I won't chase shadows. But I won't leave Cal blind either." Jonah studied her, snow collecting in the dark stubble on his jaw. "That hill killed my wife," he said flatly. "I won't let it take you." "I'm not her," Maris said softly. "And I'm not helpless." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind clawing at the eaves. Finally, Jonah nodded once. "Lower fence only," he said. "You don't cross the trough marker. Cal stays with you. Pike watches the yard. 1 shot if you see something. 2 if you're in trouble." Pike nodded. Cal's eyes lit with nervous excitement. "I know where the ground dips," he said. "I can show her. You'll listen to her," Jonah warned. "Yes," Cal said quickly. Jonah turned away, already moving uphill, his broad back swallowed by snow. Maris exhaled and followed Cal into the yard. The cold hit harder than before, a living thing that shoved and scraped. They reached the lower fence, half buried, the rails rimmed with ice. From here, the ridge was clearer, a jagged line against the white sky. The light blinked again. "There," Cal whispered. Maris narrowed her eyes. "That's not a signal," she said. "It's a struggle." Cal frowned. "What do you mean?" "Someone doesn't want it to go out," she said. "That means they're close." And nervous. A gunshot cracked. 1. Maris spun toward the house. Pike stood rigid on the porch, rifle raised, eyes locked on the tree line south of the barn. Movement. Men. 2 shapes slipping through the trees like they belonged there. "They're splitting him," Maris breathed. Light up high, men down low. Cal's face drained of color. "We need Pa." "Yes," she said. "And we can't both go." She grabbed Cal's shoulders. "You run to Pike. Tell him there are men in the south trees. Then you run to the big rock by the road, the one shaped like a bent knuckle. Wave until your father sees you. Then you come straight back to me. No detours, no heroics." Cal swallowed. "And you?" "I hold this line," she said. "Go." He ran. Maris turned back toward the ridge, heart hammering. The light flickered wildly now. Jonah was close. Too close. Another flash short and sharp. Gunfire. Her breath caught. "Damn it," she whispered. She vaulted the fence. Snow swallowed her legs, cold biting like teeth, but she pushed forward along the safe edge Cal had shown her. Pike shouted behind her. She didn't stop. On the slope, shapes resolved through the white. Jonah. Another man. They grappled near a rock outcropping, boots slipping, breath tearing from their lungs. The lantern lay shattered in the snow. The man stumbled. Jonah lunged. The stranger fell hard, head striking stone. Maris gasped. Jonah bent. The man's hand came up with a pistol. Maris moved without thought. She scooped the broken lantern and hurled it. Glass burst. Flame flared. The shot went wide, screaming uselessly into the sky. Jonah kicked the pistol away and slammed the man into the snow. Eli Ward, Jonah snarled. Of course it's you. The name landed like a slap. Eli laughed breathlessly. You always did chase lights, Kade. Below them, another shot rang out. 2. Pike. Trouble. Maris grabbed Jonah's arm. They're at the house. Jonah didn't argue. He dragged Eli downhill, rifle pressed to his spine. By the time they reached the lower fence, the yard was chaos. 3 men near the porch. Rope. A shotgun. Cal crouched behind the trough, gripping a wooden pole like a lifeline. Drop it, Jonah ordered. Now. The man with the shotgun laughed. You won't shoot Ward blood. Try me, Jonah said. Pike fired into the snow at the man's feet. The rope fell. The shotgun followed. Silence snapped tight. Eli spat blood. Enough, he barked. Back off. The men retreated, melting into the trees. Only then did Maris breathe. Cal ran to her. I did it, he said shakily. I ran like you said. You did perfectly, she told him, checking him head to toe. Jonah shoved Eli onto the porch. You're done, Jonah said. Storm or not, Eli sneered. Council will choke on your story. They won't, Maris said calmly. She pulled a notebook from her satchel. I'm writing it down. Eli blinked. What? A record, she said. Lights. Wire cutting. Names. Tonight. You think ink scares me? I think truth scares men who hide behind money, she said. She held the pencil out. You sign, she said. Or this goes to the sheriff exactly as it is, with Pike, Cal, and Jonah as witnesses. Eli hesitated. Wind rattled the porch boards. Slowly, he wrote. When he finished, Maris tore the page free. 1 copy for the council, she said. 1 for you. In case your father forgets what he asked you to do. Eli's bravado cracked. Jonah watched her like he was seeing new ground form under his feet. Pike tied Eli to a chair inside. The house filled with heat, breath, shaken laughter. Later, when Cal slept slumped over his slate and Eli sat silent by the fire, Jonah found Maris at the kitchen table. You jumped my fence, he said. Yes. You faced a gun. Yes. You broke something that's been haunting this land for years. She looked up. I didn't do it alone. No, he agreed. But you did what I couldn't. You stopped chasing ghosts and named the men behind them. He sat across from her. I lost my wife to that hill, he said quietly. I thought the storm took her. Maybe it was men all along. Sometimes it's both, Maris said. They sat with that. Morning came thin and pale. The storm eased. Jonah rode Eli to town with Pike. Maris stayed. She taught Cal fractions at the kitchen table. By evening, Jonah returned. Council's rattled, he said. Sheriff's involved. Good, she said. He studied her. You staying? He asked. For now, she said. This valley needs a teacher more than it needs another woman turned out by weather. A slow smile spread across his face. Then we'll make room, he said. She stepped onto the porch that night, stars bright above the ridge that no longer held a light. For the first time since she'd arrived, the land felt quiet. Not empty, quiet. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.